All right, what I want to do is just second one here and talk about the actual demonstration and how it's cool and how it really worked. Before I was talking about the impact of this in another talk and why this is amazing, how you were able to basically turn machine learning into a commodity. So let's look at the demonstration. Let's go down here. So what they're going to do, what they did in the demonstration, it seems like a bad sentence structure. Let's just talk about it. In the build train part of this, they found historical data from inside of Snowflake in a public data set. They looked at incremental data that could be gathered as part of an intake. They combined those into feature sets. They ran the autopilot, AWS Sagemaker Autopilot. So they called Sagemaker Autopilot, passing that data. And we know the outcomes from the historical data, and we have a bunch of inputs for that. And then Sagemaker went out and did a training cycle. It went out and tried a couple different algorithms. It fed the different parameters. It did some auto-tuning. And it's really amazing because a lot of that requires heavy skill if you're going to do it. In this case, we just apply extra compute to the problem and let it run more than we might have otherwise, but I don't have to have people that understand it quite as well. We still need to be able to look at it and see if it's doing the right recommendations. But in this case, Autopilot actually deployed a web service endpoint. And then when we came to the execution side of this, we got submitted data, which was intake surveys. That got combined into the single feature set with the historical data and with other data. And then we basically called the SageMaker endpoint that had been deployed as part of the training cycle, and we passed in that data that came from the intake survey combined with the other. It's pretty amazing. And then we got an answer back. So let's go into more detail because I think it's probably worthwhile if you really are thinking of using either of these tools for this type of operation. You want to build a new machine learning platform without building a machine learning platform. So in this case, they created a Snowflake SageMaker integration. They deployed a SageMaker environment with CloudFormation. These are the main components that came up into that. They found global data, and they took historical questionnaires or intake surveys, and they imported the AWS Autopilot functions. And then they called Autopilot create model. And what that does is, and what they fed to it was the training table, the 11 features, right? And when you call the AWS Autopilot create model, it actually is calling externally. Any of these AWS Autopilot are actually AWS APIs. So that actually invoked the AWS APIs. And what SageMaker Autopilot did is it passed that data to several different model types, and it tweaked the hyperparameters to see what kind of fit it could get. And whatever the best of those was, it created that model, and then it deployed that model as a web endpoint. And I think that's pretty amazing. And now we can run other tests or UAT or other environmental code against that to see what we think of that. So when they call this create model here, these are kind of like the details of this. And like I said, we did the training data set and we told it what the target attribute name was when we called create model. The only other thing I think that's kind of interesting thing here, so the data inside of Snowflake needed to get to the AWS model, and Snowflake wanted to be able to call all kinds of different external functions. In this case, we needed a custom serializer. The data needed to look in a certain format, and rather than doing a bunch of Snowflake calls for that, they created a couple of JavaScript custom serializers, and that took the feature data into this custom serializer so that when they made the call to Autopilot, the data would line up the way Autopilot needed it. So on the execution side, the patient fills out the questionnaire and the data is loaded into Snowflake is JSON for the questionnaire. And in this case, they call AWS Autopilot predict outcome, and they give the model name for the model that they trained before. They give the names of the features in the questionnaire in the JSON for that, because now we just need to pass in a limited set of data so it can do prediction. And that all data was joined to the JHU active case set, which was the other part I was telling you about before. They call that web point via the external functions for predict. It uses the same custom serializer type. And then SageMaker Autopilot predicts an outcome. Should this person be intake higher priority than others? Probably the only other thing that came out in that demo was this was a little bit batchy, but you could actually make this happen on a more streaming basis. As the data appears, you could do a running prediction. So as the data appears, you would trigger and then call out to Autopilot to generate an answer. And with everything in Snowflake, all the results got put in a table. So if you're trying to figure out what the prediction was, you basically just go back to the results table. And so that's it. I just thought this was really cool and wanted to do a second part of this for people that wanted to watch this demo. So to my mind, they did a great job in the demo, but they did a little bit less of a job of giving you the overview of what was actually happening. That's what I hope this did for you.